I'm out here today picking some food for my rabbits. During the warmer summer months, even into the spring and fall, I don't buy much rabbit feed. I pick a lot of my own. I harvest a lot of my own wild grown rabbit feed. And you can too, it's pretty easy, but there's a few rules you have to understand and follow along with to do so safely and make sure your rabbits are going to get a good diet. Now the main part of the rabbits fodder or forage that I can grow and pick easily around here is grass. Just regular old grass. That's mostly what I'm picking here so far. This is just grass. I mean, nothing fancy about it. This is crabgrass stuff. That should make up the larger portion of the fodder or feed, particularly if you're doing more of a wild fodder or wild feed. Grass is great for them. It's got a great high amount of fresh vitamins, especially when it's freshly cut and it's not dried. It's quite high in vitamins, and it's got a high water content, which means that they digest food easier and they don't have to drink water as much at all. So feeding them fresh greens helps them to get a lot more water in their diet, which does help a lot with pregnant and nursing does. The next part is the more broad leafy greens. Just as an example here, I got dandelion. Over here I got some chicory leaf. Your broader leafy greens, you might think that the bigger leaves are generally better, but they're often not. These, particularly the dandelion and chicory, which grow crazy around here, believe it or not, they're a little bit low in fiber. They're kind of high in protein, almost 20% protein in this leaf right here at that growth stage for chicory. But it's a little low in fiber, and it's what they call a digestive stimulant or a bitter, which means that if you feed them too much of these things, it will give them diarrhea, which that can be fatal for a rabbit. You don't want to do that. There's lots of problems that come with that. Nothing wrong with feeding a little dandelion leaf or chicory leaf, but you want to go easy on it. I would only give them a couple per day. If they were real big, I'd probably only give them one. But this size, I'll give them a few of these leaves a day, but not too much. These do have an insane level of vitamins and minerals in them that really kick them into high health quickly, but you don't want to overdo it. You need that longer stem grass. Your grass, it's better if you let it grow up to at least knee height to where it's starting to get real stemmy. If you're just feeding grass clippings, you can do that. But if you're just feeding lawnmower style grass clippings, you're going to be a little bit low on the fiber, believe it or not. You're a little bit low on the non-digestible cellulose fibers, which rabbits need a lot of. And they actually take that non-digestible fibers and they turn it into a protein source in their gut during a fermentation process. So that's more of the feed that they need. Now, there are more that you can feed your rabbits. So over here, this stuff's still a little bit small this year, but I've got clover. I grow a lot of white clover around here and some red clover. Now, this stuff is quite high in protein, usually around 16%. Sometimes it gets closer to 20% protein just before the flowering stage for a lot of your clovers. It's not too low in fiber. It's not the highest in fiber. It's not like a good stemmy grass. It's this a little bit lower in fiber, but it's still pretty high in the vitamins and minerals. The issue, though, you need to know with your clovers is, particularly with your red clover, is it's often medicinally used for hormonal imbalances. Clover contains progestins, which means that it acts as estrogen in the body, and it works a little, to a lesser degree, it works with rabbits. So if you overdo particularly with your red clovers, if you overdo that, you can end up causing potentially miscarriage problems in a pregnant doe. There is that potential. That's even why for human consumption, red clover often comes with a warning label, don't touch it if you're pregnant or nursing, because it messes things up. So clovers are great, but you don't want to overdo it, particularly with the clover blossom. That's usually the stronger part of the plant. Now there is one of the broad leafy greens that I feed a lot of to my rabbits. That's right here. This is burdock. Burdock is a great leafy green to feed. They'll usually eat the thing stem and all. Some of them don't prefer the stem, but most of my rabbits eat the whole thing, leaf, vein, stem and all. This one isn't so much a tender leaf. It's a much higher fiber content leaf. And they actually seem to do pretty good off of it. I've experimented with feeding mainly just these burdock leaves, even the larger ones from the more mature plants, and they do pretty good on them. You also really want to avoid any of the brassica style plants, wild brassica. We have a lot of wild mustard around here in the springtime. The whole field over there, it's all full of it. The early spring flowers that come up yellow everywhere. No, the ones that aren't dandelions. But you don't want to feed them much of that because it can tend to cause some gas. You can get a little bit of that with the clovers too, if you really overdo it. But with your brassicas, the wild mustards, even things like I grow a lot of turnips, broccoli, radishes, you don't want to really feed those to the rabbits. A lot of times wild rabbits eat my radishes, but the brassicas have a tendency to cause gas, and rabbits don't really pass gas well, and that could ultimately cause bloat, which basically means they get a giant buildup of gas in their gut that can kill them. It can burst the gut and they die. It's a horrible thing. So avoid brassicas. Feed a lot of fiber, high fiber. You can even feed tree leaves. I feed a lot of those. Some people scream at the idea. Generally, you're advised not to feed too much oak or maple. Go a little light on those leaves. Don't feed much at all from the cherry or wild cherry trees. You can feed some of those, but if you overdose, you can cause a little bit of stomach sickness. One great plant, if you want to grow it, is alfalfa. Alfalfa is amazing to grow for rabbits, particularly for nursing mothers because of its higher calcium content. It's high in fiber and very high in calcium, so it's a really great option. But it doesn't really grow wild, and it only grows in northern environments like we have up here. Basically, give them a well-rounded diet. Make sure that it is primarily grasses, long stemmy style grasses. You can throw other things in there too, but be sparse with it. Don't overdo it. Now, as far as the growth scale, how do rabbits grow when they're fed basically just these grasses and weeds versus a commercial pellet? Well, generally they grow less. If I'm feeding more of a grass-based, not even alfalfa-based kind of stuff, like most of the rabbit feeds are alfalfa-based, but if I'm feeding more of a clover-based or more of just a grass-based diet, they grow at a much slower rate because it's very hard to keep up that protein level. It really is hard to keep up that 16 to 18% protein that come in the rabbit feeds. So their growth scale is slower. Generally, my rabbits will be about half size at 10 weeks old, my standard butcher date, if I feed just a grass-based diet. They'll be slightly undersized if I feed basically just a clover-based diet. So they grow a little slower, but that's okay. And just as a cool figure, I calculated this morning about 35 pounds of fresh grass is what it takes to feed a bunny from weaning out to about a 2 to 3 pound carcass after butchering, about 12 weeks old. So just a neat fact, about 35 pounds of fresh grass and greens per bunny, and that gives me about 3 pounds of meat on my family's dinner table. It doesn't take anything fancy when you're cutting these greens for your rabbits. I do most of my work honestly just by hand, especially when the grasses are all tender like they are in the spring. They get a little tougher and I'll use either my machete, amazing machete, the cold steel kukri machete, I love it, or I'll use a grass whip if I want to get real serious. These things work great. Don't really want to use a lawnmower. I'd advise you not to use a lawnmower with a collection bag because it tends to pulverize everything, and they just kind of, if you try to store them for a few days, they just kind of sit and ferment and go bad, and you don't want that. You want to keep things fresh. Also, you don't want to feed anything that has berries or mature seeds in it unless you really know what you're working with. If you know that it's non-poisonous or non-toxic, there's a lot of toxic plants, wild plants out there, particularly your nightshades, and there's a lot of variety of toxic and even poisonous nightshades that could really hurt and kill your rabbits. I mean, they can hurt and kill people too. If you don't know what you're dealing with, that's pretty simple. Stick to your stemmy grasses, clovers, things that are easy to identify. dandelion and chicory, which looks like dandelion until it grows a big stem and gets about yay high. Things that are easily identifiable. If you don't know what it is, it's best to just leave it. I'd advise you to go look it up in a identification book, or go use the little plant ID app that everybody has on their phone but me these days. Check out pictures on Google. Only use things that you know you can identify. There are some plants that'll really hurt your animals. You don't want to do that. So how much do you feed the rabbits? Well, there's a rule of thumb, which is about half of their body size per day in a nice tight bundle of fresh greens. And that's generally done twice. If they don't eat it all, twice. Now, it might look like they're saving some for later, but oftentimes they're not going to get around to the last portion. If it's something that they've sat on, stepped on, they tend to sit on it, squish it into the cage, and poop on it when it's more than they can handle at once. At that point, they're not going to touch it. They're clean animals, and they're waiting for something fresh. So pay attention, observe their behavior. If they look hungry, if the grass, the greens that you gave them are all crushed down into the cage, give them some new fresh stuff bundled up and see if they go for that. If they do, well, they were hungry. Make sure, if you're feeding a mainly greens-based diet, that you do not underfeed. That's very important, because it's a lower protein method. You really need to feed a little extra to keep up the growth. Make sure you don't short them at all in the feed process. So pay attention to your rabbits. Make sure you watch their behavior. If they start looking a little more agitated or anxious, they're probably hungry. Feel their backbone. If their spine starts sticking up a little bit more, start feeding them double. Bulk it up on them a little more. They can eat quite a bit of those greens, and you really need to just give them as much as they can handle. Hey, if you guys have any more questions about what a rabbit can or cannot, or even just should or should not eat, let me know in the comments. Good chance I know the answer to your question, and I'll do what I can to help you out with that. If not, probably somebody else reading the comments will know the answer. So let me know what your questions are in the comments, and I'll do my best to help you. Well, thanks for watching Northern Homestead, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. Don't forget to click the like button and look around for more good videos. I'll catch you guys later. Get out there and do your chores now. Bye.